Welcome to Sprinkle with Hope podcast and your host, Shane. Today, our guest is Stephen Crane. He is the author of the memoir, I Can Appreciate That, the novel Staring at the Ceiling, and more than 1,000,000 words of advertising copy. His other full-time jobs are husband and father, with additional titles situationally included coach, volunteer, foster parent, mentor, and amateur pancake chef. I want to hear about that. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us. We're really looking forward to this conversation.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I gave our listeners a very high level of what you've done, but let's just dive into, you've written some books and things. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
So the intro covers a lot of that. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, where I am an advertising copywriter. I've lived here since I was 7, and I'm almost 50 now. I'm actually one of the weird people who actually is from Atlanta. Most of the people who live here aren't really from. It's a transplant city, so there's a lot of people who live here who aren't from here. Lived here most of my life. Went to school in Columbia, South Carolina, the University of South Carolina. Go Gamecocks! And would still live there if there were any jobs in that lovely city.
Yeah.
But advertising brought me back here, and I've lived here ever since, working as a writer in advertising and now as a freelance writer. And in some of my spare time, when freelance goes from feast to famine, I've dabbled in writing a couple of books, one of which is a novel, and the other, which you mentioned, is a memoir.
Nice. I want to hear about this amateur pancake maker.
Everybody has to have a hobby, right?
Yeah, I get it.
And apparently, if you look on social media, there's all kinds of people who do crazy pancake art, which is very ambitious and impressive. And that's not me. I guess somebody's making money doing that, but clearly it's not me. There's not a whole lot to say about that, other than that I love cooking and experimenting, and pancakes are like a perfect blank slate, right? They're only as good as what you add to them, right? So they can be everything from bacon to fruit to chocolate to whatever. So I get the kids in the kitchen with me, and it turns into like mad chemistry.
That's awesome. So no plans for a restaurant.
In my younger days, I actually had visions of that, and then we thought about maybe doing like a food truck or something.
Oh yeah,
and I think that's a young person's game too.
Yeah.
But it's good to have a dream.
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second. I'm so sorry.
We'll just cut this part out. That's fine.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries.
So tell us a little bit about the books that you've written. What were they about, and how can people find them, and so forth?
Yeah, sure. So like I said, the first one that I wrote is called Staring at Ceiling. That's actually a novel, and that was that's like every writer's young dream. We're like, oh yeah, I can write the great American novel, and it ends up being like this self-absorbed sort of experience that it's a good learning experience. I wouldn't, that was a fun book to write, but that was not a book I needed to write. That was a book I wanted to write. And it was, just sort of a fun sort of fictionalization of some of the wild times I had with some very awesome and interesting people in my younger years. The second book, I like to say very differently, is a book that I didn't even want to write. It's a book that I had to write, which is, so again, I'm 50 years old, and it turns out to be a memoir, which is sort of, that the whole thing starts with my now 16-year-old son, my oldest son. He and I are having a conversation, and I don't even remember what we were talking about, but he said something to me. I sort of said something back to him, and his response to me was, dang, why do you always have to be so negative about everything? And a lot of times, when your kids, especially, I don't know if you guys have kids or not, but especially with teenagers, you can sort of go, well, because, I'm the dad, or because I said so, or whatever, and you can sort of disregard them. But when he said that to me, it hit me right in my heart, and it stopped me. And honestly, I didn't have an answer for him. I didn't know what to say to why
Yeah.
do you always have to be so negative. Turns out that conversation happened in the end of 2019, just months before the whole world's getting ready to go on shutdown.
Yeah.
We didn't even know what was coming, in early 2020. And so as a freelance writer, when pandemic hit, a lot of my work sort of went away for a little while. And so the universe was basically saying, well, here's some space and time. Why don't you answer that question? And so I sat down and I basically spent all of 2020 thinking about researching, writing, and sort of marinating my brain in that question of why do you always have to be so negative? And what that turns out to be is me revisiting a whole bunch of episodes from my life that, whether it's medical complications as a child, or losing loved ones to cancer, or losing jobs, or failed relationships, or whatever it is, things that I would look at and my default would be, dang, I really don't appreciate that. Figuring out why I didn't appreciate that, and looking at that with hindsight and realizing that there were these awesome, gigantic hidden blessings in all of those things that I originally thought were these negative, terrible things, that with some hindsight, you can actually look back and go, wow, I can appreciate that. Here's what I gained from that. Here's what I learned from that. Here's what I can use moving forward from that. So that becomes the book. I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I agree with you. I think oftentimes we can kind of look at things maybe a little bit negatively, but if we really try to find the positive in it, it's there. We just have to look a little bit beyond the surface, right? And that's kind of what it sounds like you were saying is, there was some negative things that you could have thought were bad situations, but really there was blessings from it.
100%.
Awesome. So what kind of are you working on now? Like, what do you do in your free time? What are your hobbies? What are some of the things that you like to do?
Well, so I referenced earlier that freelance is sort of a feast or famine game, and luckily I'm sort of back in the feast section there. So I'm busy doing a whole lot of writing, and writing that actually pays, since writing books is a fun thing, but unless you're one of the lucky few who have a representation in a giant audience, I wouldn't suggest that anyone who's looking to get rich jump into that
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah.
But so yeah, a lot of work, a lot of family stuff, and yeah. We're raising two teenage boys, and that's an interesting transition, going from being super actively involved in being like the coaches of their sports teams and stuff like that, or being really involved with their school, to sort of taking a step back and letting them figure out, well, all right, well, what are you actually interested in? What do you want to pursue? And sort of letting them find their own path, still sort of being there, but taking a step back and saying, go for it. I'll be here on the sideline rooting you on, and I'll here for whatever you need, but not driving that train as hard as you used to.
Yeah. I always like to find out why people do certain things. So Stephen, what interested you in writing, and how did you get into that field?
So that's another that's a good question, and another interesting one. I'm one of those weird people who knew what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be, when I was like 9 or 10 years old, which is super weird. It was like specific to advertising, and at that time, I don't think I even knew I don't think I knew anybody who worked in that job. I don't think aside from like the husband on Bewitched, who I think worked in advertising, I don't think I even knew of anybody who worked in advertising. But I was oddly fascinated by writing and psychology and whatnot. And one of the greatest gifts that my parents ever gave me and my sister was they had us aptitude tested, which is this, if you're not familiar, it's this cool sort of, it's not like the SAT or the ACT that tests you on like specific knowledge. It's a test of your natural skills, right? So they give you like this battery of tests that sort of measures you on everything from like musical ability to critical thinking to spatial relations to vocabulary to, whatever. It's like 30 different tests. And at the end of that, they give you like this score sheet of, well, here's what your brain does well, and here's where you're not as naturally talented. And then they match that with like a list of jobs that basically says, based on how you think and what your natural talents are, you'd be really good at these jobs. Conversely, here's some stuff you should never try to do because you would be terrible at that. Don't be a brain surgeon. Don't be an airline pilot. Don't be, whatever. But like on the list of the things that said that I should do, that, like this giant scientific exercise comes back with this thing that says, I need something that is deadline oriented, highly creative, changes all the time, and allows me to use my vocabulary skills. Guess what? That's basically a description of advertising writing.
Yeah.
So, I was already interested in it, and this scientific test said, yeah, you'd actually be pretty good at that, which is like this amazing gift when we had that test done when we were juniors in high school, right as you're getting ready to go into college and pursue, spend a whole bunch of money to pursue a particular job field, which was like this giant gift of confidence going into college to actually pursue something instead of, no knock on anybody who goes to college and doesn't have it figured out yet. I think that's probably most people, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it really felt like a leg up to sort of know what I wanted to do, and that I had a pretty good chance of being successful at that based on how my brain works.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And it's all I've ever done. So, fast forward 25, 30 years later, all I've ever done is work as a writer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I wished it would have been that way for me, honestly. Would have made things a lot easier, but
it's not too late. So in the spirit of appreciation and paying that forward, like I said, we have 2 teenage sons, and my oldest is now a junior in high school. We just had him take that same battery of tests, which was, a cool experience for him, but also for me, having done it in the past, to sort of see him go through it and know where that can help him as he moves forward. So,
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So Shane and I, we love laughter, and I haven't asked this question in a long time, but what is maybe an embarrassing moment or something that you can laugh at yourself about right now that you think, oh man, at the time, maybe not have been so funny? Or
oh man, that's actually a tough one. I think some people are really good at being, self-effacing, or, I'm forgetting the word that actually is, but I tend to be super critical of myself, and so I have the hardest time laughing at myself. I'm hot tempered, and I've never actually been ejected from a little league sports event as a coach, but I've probably walked right up to that line. I've probably gotten as close as you can get, and probably gotten like the stank eye from the umpire, and might have been one more word away from it. And those are things in hindsight that you sort of regret. When you're supposed to be out there as the adult in a situation leading a group of 10-year-olds, and you lose your mind a little bit, and even 8 hours later you're like, that was stupid, and then a week later you're like, what what am I doing?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think it's this, what I was thinking when you were sharing that, and some other things earlier, that perspective is really an interesting thing, that it's sort of how we look at things. You might have had some stuff that happened earlier in your life that you now can look at and see the lesson. But that, I think, is a change in perspective from your earlier years to now. And I think that's the same thing. We're at a little league game. We get frustrated as a parent, but the kids don't really care. They're just having fun. And so I think.
Absolutely. So my youngest son, who's 2 years younger than my oldest, so I used to coach both of them, and in baseball primarily. Me coaching them exclusively in baseball. And I went all the way through from like 5 years old to 15 with my youngest son. And
Awesome.
we went to Cooperstown together, right? And I don't know
Wow.
if you guys know
Yeah.
yeah, if you're familiar, if you're not familiar, for any of your audience who's not familiar, it's like this mecca of Little
Oh,
League
yeah.
baseball, probably only secondary to like the Little League World Series, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's basically like a week-long summer camp for kids where they get to go and live in dorms with their team, with whatever. And you play 7 or 8 games, and then there's a single elimination tournament, whatever. There's like 100 teams each week that come, and like a third of those teams are like legitimately have a shot at winning the whole thing, and like a third of them are somewhere in the middle, and a third of them are just happy to be there, right?
Yeah.
In hindsight, we were in that bottom third. We were just happy to be there, but we thought we were in that middle third,
Yeah.
right? So we go, and we're like, our goal is to win several games or have a winning record, whatever. Really, our goal was to win a game, right? We
Yeah.
went and we played 7 games, and we didn't win a single one. We went winless in our week in Cooperstown, right? Which for the adults, that gets frustrating. The further along
Yeah,
you go, that gets
sure.
frustrating, right?
Yeah.
And so at the end of that, at the very end of our experience, we had just finished losing our last game. We were out of the tournament. Our week was over. We were getting ready to sort of pack it up and go home. I had been with my son and his whole team as one of the coaches the whole week, and not a whole lot of quiet time between the two of us, right? And so we were just sort of walking through the park, and it was just the two of us, and kind of having this quiet moment that we hadn't had all week. And I was still sort of stewing a little bit about the little things that we could have done better. If it would just gone one way this game, or one pitch different, or one play different, we would have won a game, and I would feel completely different about this whole experience. My 14-year-old son grabs my hand and he says, "That was fun. I love you."
Hmm.
You talk about a change in perspective, and like an
Yeah.
instantaneous. It's the same thing as my old son saying, "Why do you have to be so negative?"
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So like in that situation, I'm supposed to be the adult. I'm supposed to be the one teaching him, right? And that child, just out of like the pureness of his heart, he gives me the answer, right? It's
Yeah.
that is the experience. That was fun. I love you. That was great. I'll never forget this. This was fantastic. It doesn't even matter what the scoreboard said in any of
Yeah.
those moments. So
Yeah. Yeah. What a great lesson that kids can teach us often if we listen to them. Sometimes I think we just ignore what they're saying, but what a great lesson in life, I think, is that, yeah, have fun, but it doesn't really matter in certain cases. So that's awesome. So near the end of our podcast, Jason and I have what we call the double down dose. Are you ready for this?
I'm scared but ready.
We'll love that. So I have a question for you, and then Jason will ask a question. So not very scary, but we love to talk about hope. Our podcast is called Sprinkle with Hope. We really focus on that. And so the first question of the double down dose is, how would you define hope?
So so here's the word guy failing for words, right? So it's I think I would think of it similarly to faith, right? Which is sort of like confidence in something that you can't see, right? Knowing that even if in this particular moment you're struggling, or for the longest time you've been struggling, that there's something better up ahead. That whether you have a reason to believe that or not, that something better is on the way. That there's always going to be valleys, but there's always going to be peaks. And to have hope is to always know that no matter how dark it is or how deep it is, that light is up ahead.
Love it.
Yeah, I love it. And so I'm going to go with the second question. Sometimes we vary a little bit, but the second question I like to ask is, and you kind of touched on it just a little bit, but what is your definition of love?
So I actually write about this at significant length in the book. It's interesting. and I'll get a little heavy with you for a second, but one of the things I mentioned, in the challenges that I'd faced that I didn't appreciate was losing people to cancer, right?
Mm,
I
yeah.
unfortunately lost my sister to cancer when she was 23 and I was 20, which pretty formative, experience, in terms of my cynicism and frustration and all that. In that situation, though, what I gained from her specifically, and from the other people around her in that situation, is an understanding of love in a way that I had not seen before and didn't even recognize until years later, right? So within a within a short span of time, my sister was graduating college, became engaged, found out she had cancer, got married, and quickly passed away. All
That's
in the span
terrible.
of
I'm sorry.
less than 2 years, right? So all that happens all at one time, and so in that span of time, her boyfriend, then fiance, then husband, then widow, really sort of ended up teaching me a lot about what love looks like, right? So I also am the fortunate product of two awesome parents who just recently celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
And so in all of those instances, what people have shown me about what love is not giving up, right, on somebody else, but also the understanding that somebody else's happiness, somebody else's joy, somebody else's needs, somebody else's needs essentially are more important than your own. And when you get to that point, and you don't have, so there's lots of different definitions of love, just like there's lots of definitions of appreciate. There's familial love, there's brotherly love, there's romantic love, whatever. You don't have to be like in romantic or physical love to love somebody and recognize that they are more important than you are.
Yeah, that's we really do like asking those questions. I think often we don't think on a deeper level about those things. We always hear about love and hope, but we don't actually take the chance to really think about what it means to us. And so we love asking those questions, love getting all of the answers that we get. It's so interesting to see every person we ask pauses for a second and really just thinks about it. So you were no different. You did exactly the same as everyone. We really do love the answers that we get from that. It's very interesting to see. So Stephen, thank you so much for your time today. Really have enjoyed this discussion and your insight into some things. I think, just really enjoyed this discussion with you.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I totally appreciate it. If anybody is interested in learning more about I Can Appreciate That, it's easily findable on Amazon.com and everywhere people get their ebooks.
Awesome. Yeah, I was just going to ask how they could get a hold of you or get a copy of your book and things like that if they have questions, but that's great.
It's also got its own Instagram account at I Can Appreciate That, where we're in Facebook. People want to join what we're calling our community of gratitude. People can check in and share their own stories of gratitude and appreciation. That's actually the greatest gift I've gotten out of the whole experience is the community that comes out of that. When you share your own stories and people read or hear what you've gone through, when you're sharing that, you think that you're the only person that's ever experienced those things. And when you share them, you realize that even though somebody didn't have the exact same experience that you did, something similar or something, relatable happened to them. And they go, oh, wow, me too. Or let me tell you what happened to me. And then you end up learning about each other and growing, in community and in a way that never would have happened if you hadn't taken the time to answer your 16-year-old son's question.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm glad you brought up, just thinking about gratitude. And I know we just had Thanksgiving and So I think most everybody was reflecting recently on what they are grateful for, but I don't think it should stop there either, right? Like this gratitude should be something we think about often on a regular basis, even a daily basis, the things that we have in our life that oftentimes we take for granted. And maybe that is our kids or spouse or, siblings or other things, right? So I appreciate that message.
Yeah, 100%. It actually changed my whole outlook. Spending hours a day thinking about that and in the spirit of appreciation and gratitude. Like I said, it sort of marinates your brain in that whatever you spend your time thinking about, that becomes how you think and how you act and how you speak and how you treat people, and it becomes who you are. Right. So if you spend a year marinating in that spirit, it kind of changes your brain a little bit and rewires you. And that's a lasting gift. So yeah, you want to spend 5 minutes a day being grateful and appreciating stuff and paying it forward, it'll change your life.
I love it. Thanks so much, Stephen. We appreciate you coming on with us today.
Thanks.